Hi, guys. It's Brooke here. I have a super quick favor to ask. When you have a moment, please take just a second to give this podcast a 5-star review. This will help me to continue the podcast and continue to bring these resources to the community. Thank you so much for that 5-star review.
And that's when I had my breakdown and oh my gosh, this is real. My child just told me she loved me for the first time in 17 years. I was waiting to hear. And not only that, but it was like related to the lesson in this, in this Hawaiian way of not giving up. And it was just, but it was too much for me to process at the time.
Hey there, it's Brooke, and welcome to Finding Hope on the Spectrum, where I have heart-to-heart conversations with parents, professionals, and autistic individuals sharing personal insight and life experiences. Together, we dive deep into supports, programs, and stories that offer inspiration, insight, and most importantly, hope for the neurodiverse community. Before we begin with today's topic, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And if you know someone who this would be helpful for, please pass it along. Remember to always stay curious, be kind, and have an open heart.
Okay, well, welcome to Finding Hope on the Spectrum. I am so excited about this conversation. I have been looking forward to it for a while now, and you're in for a real treat today. So today we have Valeri and Lora Tompkins, and they are just such excellent advocates for spellers and our community. And I'm just honored to have them on. And Valeri is Laura's mom, and she's also a Spellers method provider and excellent at what she does in both roles. And of course, we have Lora here today, and I'm just so grateful to have you on, Lora, to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. This is your platform to share and to advocate, and it's such an important part of your work and your mission. So thank you so much for both of you for being here today.
Yes, and thank you so much for having us. Lora loves any opportunity she can get to advocate. We both do. So we appreciate you having us on.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's start, Valeri, with you. If you could start just by sharing your journey as a mom and what led you to discover spelling as a form of communication for your daughter.
Yeah, so I'm sure our story will sound very, very similar to many families out there. Lora was diagnosed with autism and ADHD just before her second birthday, so pretty young. She was born in 2004, diagnosed in 2006. And so what followed for the next 10 plus years, again, will sound like many families' journeys. They recommended early intervention. We did speech therapy, occupational therapy. We did floor time. We saw a neurologist. We saw, back in the day, we called them Dan doctors. Now they're MAPS doctors, but we did biomedical intervention, anything to try to work on getting her speech and getting some of her so-called behaviors under control, because she had some meltdowns and some tantrums and some very, very difficult transitions, disruptions to routine were very hard. So we were basically bending over backwards just to try to find solutions that would make her life more comfortable. You can take a little break if you want while I talk. You can stay in the room. There you go. And take a body break. So, but nothing really seemed to help. We would have little bits of success. We took sugar out of her diet and we saw a little bit more calm. We did gluten-free, casein-free. We saw some effects from the diet, but nothing was really like a radical shift in her behaviors or her language skills. So ABA was also a big factor in her life. We had full-time ABA for more than 10 years in home for many, many hours a week. So she also tried PECS, which is, picture exchange system. We tried AAC devices. We tried American Sign Language. You name it. I think if you name it, we probably tried it at some point. And then in 2021, so 5 years ago, the book Underestimated came out. If people aren't familiar with that, it's called Underestimated: An Autism Miracle. And it's written by J.B. Hanley and his son, Jamie, about their spelling journey. And Amazon picked me out of their algorithm and said, "Hey, lady, you've got every book on autism we've ever sold here. You might want this one." So I said, "Sure, let's read that." And, and I was kind of like, a miracle. I've been promised a lot of miracles. And so I was kind of cynical. By this point, she was 16 and a half at this point. And but I read the book and I thought, well, this is interesting. It's about this young man who learned how to point to letters on a letterboard. It looks something like this. And I thought, well, that's pretty low tech. What's that about? But I was intrigued enough, and I thought, well, I'll look into it. And it turns out that the provider in the book was in San Diego, and we were in LA at the time. So I thought, well, let's do a field trip to San Diego, see what this is all about. And so in April, 1 month after we read the book, April of 2021, we went and saw her provider for the first time, Dawn Marie Gavin. And when they start, and I think we're going to talk about spelling in a minute, but when they start, it really doesn't look like, no, they don't sit down and start, pouring out their hopes and dreams. It's a very learned process, a lot of motor skills to be taught. But I saw enough in that first session where I thought, well, this might be something. And we stuck with it. And we stuck with it for months and years before she became, an open speller, and to the point where she is today. But I'm so glad we did, because it completely changed not just her life, but my life and the entire family's life. She has a whole new, she says she has a whole new trajectory now with spelling, being able to communicate for the first time in her life.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. And I'm so excited to have Lora share today too. And, I think you touched on so many important things, and, just even that idea that you've been told, so many miracles. And I think so many families are in that place where they're weary, or they're not sure if they should go for it. They're not sure it's possible for their child for whatever reason. And I think that's just why it's so important to have you on, and to have you, do all the work that you guys are doing in the field to give hope that.
Thank you. It's compounded, the lack of hope and the miracles promised. It's compounded by the fact that the experts say, well, she has the mental capacity of a 4-year-old, and she's not capable of learning. So you hear these things drilled into you over the years. But in reality, it's just that they don't have a way of testing non-speakers that they can show what they truly know, because it's all motor-based, it's speech-based, it's pointing. And so when they give her those tests, she wasn't successful. And so you're further beaten down by the system that says, she's not in there, she can't do this.
Yeah.
Adjust accordingly.
Yes. And I know you've seen so many clients that you work with, and I have too, that have been able to show that those limitations are completely false.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah. In fact, the opposite. They're a lot smarter than I am.
Yes. Yes. I had to look up a word the other day with one of our clients.
All the time.
I know. So, and what was communication like for Lora before spelling?
So frustrating. A lot of hand bleeding, a lot of mispokes on AAC devices where she couldn't really choose what she was looking for. So we would think she wanted one thing, but she really wanted another. So she would get frustrated and we would get frustrated. She would take for PECS, she would take the cards and she would like to stack them and organize them, but she never used them in a purposeful way. Sign language didn't work because because of fine motor skills, she couldn't get her hand. She had some basic signs, but for the most part, couldn't get her fingers to cooperate with that. So I would say, in a word, it was beyond, 2 words, beyond frustrating for communication. We were trying everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such an important point that can lead to, I don't know, I'm guessing this was maybe the case for her, but from what I've seen, it can just lead to meltdowns or just overwhelm, frustration. And then, if you're just working on the behavior, you're not working on the core breakdown that's happening or challenge. And
you get frustrated and it feeds back to them, and you get in this feedback loop of just hopelessness.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's just such an important thing to untangle, as we look beyond behavior and really try to get to the root of why, if any of us were in that level of frustration, we would be doing the same thing.
Oh, 100%.
So, we cannot just look at the behavioral level, but that's a topic for another day. But so for someone who has never heard of this before, what is the speller's method? I know there's, or just this concept. I know there are various methods. And so, if you can share just a little bit more what this is.
Yes, it's the overall umbrella term would be spelled communication. There are 3 primary methodologies: RPM, which is rapid prompting method, which has been around longer, and then spelling to communicate, or S2C, and then speller's method. And all of them have the same basic approach, which is we take the work out of the fine motor of the speech. Speech is a fine motor skill, vision is a fine motor skill, handwriting and typing are fine motor skills. When we start spelling, we start with these letterboards that I showed you a minute ago. And we're having these, and again, looks so low tech. It's like, here's 26 letters on this board. which, for me, it just blew my mind because it's like, well, where's the app? Where's the iPad? Whatever. But what we're doing is we're having the speller point to letters, which comes from their shoulder, and shoulder is a gross motor skill. And so it's many non-speakers, many individuals with apraxia, gross motor is easier than fine motor for the same reasons we just talked about with the sign language and things that didn't work. So they're pointing to letters on a letterboard to spell, and so they're able to communicate without speech. So again, seems like such a basic concept, but it's incredible. It's an incredible methodology.
Yeah, amazing. And I love how you differentiated between the fine motor and the gross motor. And it's so important. And it's not something, previous to spelling that we had ever really thought about in this way.
No, I certainly hadn't. I didn't even know what apraxia was until we started spelling. So I had a big learning curve, but I'm so glad I did it.
Yes, absolutely. I've had some other guests on talking specifically about apraxia, and back in the day where, for me anyway, I understood it as more of just a verbal challenge.
Right, you hear childhood dyspraxia of speech, and it's very specific to speech and not to the entire body, which is how our community is affected. It's not just speech, it's an entire body ability.
Yeah. I just had Susan Daniel on, and her episode, I know. I was so excited to see all the work she's doing. And her episode just released this week as we're recording today, and she's phenomenal. And that's a whole nother thing I didn't know about with the vision. So I'm learning.
Me too. One of the first things she spelled was I see blurry. And I said, well, no, you have 20/20 vision. But when we worked with Susan, and I can't wait to listen to her respond with you, when we worked with Susan, she's like, yeah, she has 20/20 vision, but her eyes aren't teaming together. I'm like, what? But she looks at how the brain interacts with the eyes, not just how clearly someone can see, which is just your visual acuity, which was, again, to me, a whole new world of learning. And vision therapy with Susan's direction and her professional guidance really made a huge difference in Laura's spelling clarity too. So there are so many pieces to this puzzle.
Yeah.
And looking at someone and looking and seeing, oh, they look like they're seeing everything fine. There's so much more involved in that we don't know, especially when they can't yet tell us.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you shared your own personal experience with that, because it's, again, another piece to the puzzle that people, aren't as knowledgeable about and need to be, because that is a game changer. If you can actually...
You can't spell if you can't see the word.
Right. Yes. Yes. So, and what do you wish, more people understood about spellers? And, oh, you know what? I skipped ahead. Let's pause that. That's for Lora. So I'm going to edit that part out. Okay. And so, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about non-speakers?
Well, I know them because I was that person for many years. Many have unruly bodies, or they don't look like they're paying attention, or they don't look like they're listening. And so when we see someone who's not looking at us when we're talking to them, or they're running around the room, we assume, well, they're not listening, they don't understand, and they don't have a reliable way of showing us they understand. So we presume things like intellectual disabilities. That doesn't mean that intellectual disabilities don't exist in this population. It just means that the vast majority of those we assume had one probably don't have one. So we make these assumptions based on what they're able to show us. And until they are able to find a reliable means of communication, Laura's getting interested in this. Right? Until they have a reliable way of telling us, we don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's been a lot. The list of misconceptions about non-speakers is very long, right, Laura? Come on over.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm so glad that, Lora, you just sat down with us, because I would love to have you to share. And I know you had prepared a few things. I'd given you a few questions. And like I said, if there's anything else you want to add, you're welcome to. But the first thing I would love to have you share is, what spelling has given you that you didn't have before?
Yeah. And Lora has typed her answers on the iPad. So I'm just going to have, and it's talk to text. So I'm just going to have the iPad read the answers that she gave those, and I'll read them one sentence at a time. So when you were asked what spelling has given you, you read?
Spelling gave me a voice, but it also gave me a way to participate in my own life in a meaningful way for the first time. I'm able to express my preferences, hopes, and goals, and my family helps me to achieve them.
That is beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you so much.
important because what she does is, she's like, yeah, I have a voice now, but it's so much more than just that. She can actually direct her own life, because for 17 years, we were just guessing
Yeah.
and hoping and making decisions for her without any input other than an unreliable body's indicators. So imagine having no control over your life and then being able to have complete control.
It's huge. I mean, that is quality of life, right?
Yeah.
That's really what we want for all of our clients that we work with, and this population. We want them to have a high quality of life.
Yes. And it's really hard to have that high quality of life when you're not able to participate in the decision making.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Laura, because it puts priorities, it puts perspective on what's important in life, right? And we're thinking about all the things we want to work on with our kids, and we really want to have that bigger picture focus, have that ability to make those decisions for ourselves, and to
Who doesn't, right? Who doesn't want to direct their own life?
yes, and it is possible. And so, and what do you wish more people understood about spellers or non-speaking individuals?
We are intelligent human beings with bodies that don't cooperate with us. We might look like we aren't listening or understanding, but we are hearing and absorbing everything. We have a right to a robust education just like everyone else.
She's very big on education because she was basically robbed of an age-appropriate education. By the time I took her to school, she was a junior in high school and still being taught her colors and her numbers and single-digit addition. So one of her very first priorities was, I need access to an education. I need to learn. I need to feed my brain. She was largely self-taught in what she did learn, but she is very big on her non-speaking peers having access, whether they can spell openly and show not having that right to an age-appropriate education, because there's really no harm in providing an age-appropriate education, but the harm when you don't provide one is huge. And that comes from something called the least dangerous assumption. I don't know if I talked to you about that before, but the least dangerous assumption was something that Anne Donnellan came up with back, I think, in the 80s, where if you teach a child something and they're not capable of learning, you really haven't done a lot of harm. But if you don't teach them and they were capable, then the harm is dramatic. And that's what you were robbed of for all those years. And many, many of her peers, through in their 20s and 30s when they start spelling, have all that opportunity lost.
Yes. That's huge.
That's really where her desire to advocate, came from, is that she sees a lot of her peers being robbed of that same thing, and she doesn't want that. She wants to advocate for them to have the access that she now has.
Yes, I love that. And it's so important, and it's still going on. It's still a huge thing that needs to change in our schools.
Yes. And they're fighting it. The schools are fighting it every step of the way, which is really sad and really unfortunate. But hopefully, as more and more non-speakers get their voice, many, many of them want to advocate. It's Lora calls me on making generalizations about her population, so I'm very cautious about that. So I don't want to say every non-speaker wants to advocate or every non-speaker is brilliant, right? Because she kind of calls me on that. But very many of them do want to advocate for their peers and do want to, share that message with the world. And when she first became an open speller, she said, I want to study neuroscience so I can understand apraxia. But as months went by, and I thought, oh, great, I'm gonna have to go back to school with her to learn neuroscience, that just, stretch my brain a little. But as the months went by, she's like, yes, I still want to understand that, but there's this bigger need for advocacy in my world, and that's where I want to put my energy and effort. So that's what she's doing now.
Amazing. Incredible. Keep doing the work, Lora. It's so important, and you're having such an impact on people's lives. You really are. And we need people like you to express and to share and to show how important this is. So I'm grateful for everything you're doing, and it's helping my clients too, because you're also giving hope, to families that need it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I wish there had been, I wish I had heard of spelling when she was younger, because I see these younger kids now getting into spelling, and it's so exciting to think that they won't be missing out on as many years as she and some of her friends missed out of being educated and being taught and being presumed competent. That's what this is all about. It's just way before spelling even starts, let alone open communication. It's the presumption of competence that really changes, that really, she said, changed her life. When I started talking to her at her age level, having conversations with her, whether or not she could answer back with speech, that completely changed her demeanor and her, I hate the word behaviors, but it changed, how she conducted herself. It gave her confidence, all of those things way before she could, express herself with spelling.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, maybe I have talked about presuming competence quite a bit in different episodes, but it might, for those who've never heard that term or don't really understand it, it might be worth just sharing a little bit about what that meant for you and what that means in the field.
Yeah. And presuming competence doesn't mean presuming that they know everything and that they're geniuses.
Yes.
It just means presuming they're capable of learning at, barring any kind of brain injury or, genetic disorder that might alter them biologically. Putting that aside, assuming that they are capable of learning, that they want to learn, and that learning can happen at their age level. So instead of teaching you your colors in the 11th grade, you probably should have been taught geography and, psychology and, chemistry. So it's just presuming that they have the ability to learn and treating them that way, instead of presuming that they're not competent because they can't necessarily show it in the ways that we are measuring it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so important.
I had done it years ago, and I don't judge anybody who doesn't do it because I was in their shoes. But the idea is that once you know better, you do better. That's not my quote. That's someone else's that we say a lot. But once you know better, then you implement. You can't go back. This is from Lora, not from me. You can't go back and sort of wallow in the guilt of, I wish I knew, I wish I had treated you differently. Because that's kind of like, do that on your own time. It's a little bit of a waste of time when there's so much to be done and so much to help her do and achieve now that we do know.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And I love that quote. I use that all the time. And yes, I think it was Maya Angelou.
I think it was too. I just didn't want to misattribute. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. Yes. It's so telling and so true. And that's all we can do is just keep learning and keep growing and educating ourselves and having a growth mindset.
Yes. 100%.
So now, for Lora, you're advocating for others. I love your Instagram page. I really enjoy it. And I'm going to make sure to include it in our show notes too. So all of our listeners can go onto your Instagram page. What message do you want to share with the world?
Do not entrust NonSpeakers, or the world will be robbed of their great gifts.
Do not write off NonSpeakers, or the world will be robbed of their great gifts.
Help us to communicate by using the method that works best for us, not the methods the so-called experts have deemed best for us.
Yeah. The so-called experts were trying to drill speech into her for 12 years, and God, you can take a break.
Yeah.
And it just, it wasn't working because that speech is not going to be, she did actually acquire more speech when we started spelling, but speech is not going to be her primary way of communicating reliably and robustly, because she can write, pages and pages of beautiful words and, creative writing on her iPad, and she can't use speech for that. So it's really important to, I think, don't close your mind to saying, okay, it has to be speech, or it has to be an AC device, or even that it has to be spelling. Just to have an open mind about taking it from an individual perspective. What is going to work best for this human? Not what have I been pre-programmed to instruct them in, but let's look at the way they move their body. Let's look at their level of speech. We have a lot of people in this community that have a lot of speech, but it's not necessarily reliable, and it's not necessarily their most robust means of communication. So it can be deceptive. Well, they can say lines from a movie, or they can repeat back what I say, and that's the limit of what they can achieve. And some of these people that have that can say so much more on a letterboard or a keyboard. So sometimes speech can actually be deceiving, ironically. But just taking it from an individual to an individual perspective and evaluating where do we meet them that will make them the most successful, not what have I been taught to have them use.
Right. That's so well said. And I think that, there's something to be said about, allowing the individual to show us what's working for them and honoring that.
Absolutely.
It's so important that we really take the time as professionals to consider, that individual and what they need and what appears to be effective or not, and keep going down that path until we figure it out.
And she had a stint in life from the ages of 3 to 6 where she went to a floor time, DI or floor time school. And they are very much about following the child's lead. And she was probably happier there. She aged out at 6 of the school and then went on into a nightmare of a non-public school journey for the next whatever. But in that place, she was very happy. And they were presuming her competence before I knew what presumption of competence was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she got into the non-public school system and they didn't presume competence. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. When she was 3, they were treating her like she was 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And now you're back to treating her like a 2-year-old. So, there were examples, little flashes of glimpses of that early in her life when she was happier, when people were presuming her competence. I just didn't know how to capture it or explain it or describe it then so that I could then duplicate it. We got, mired in this school system of, it was.
It is a journey. It's a journey. And I mean, it's the path that so many families are on and trying to navigate it. And it's complicated.
It's complicated, it's expensive, it's confusing. You've got people who are trying to get your money that don't have your best interests. And you've got doctors and experts that will be disagreeing with each other. And you're like, but the thing I wish I had realized 15 years ago is that you as the parent are the best expert on your kid. Not even your MAPS doctor, not even your psychologist, psychiatrist, not even the teacher that might spend more hours per day with them. You are the expert. And I wish I had trusted my gut a little bit on things instead of doing what people told me to do. So if I had any advice for parents, it would be, step back, absolutely listen to the experts to see what they have to say, to see if there's some nuggets in there that will help your child progress or learn to communicate, but trust your gut.
Yeah, 100%. I'm so glad you shared that. I believe in that wholeheartedly. And that's something that's part of my life's work, is to help parents see that they are the experts. And it's hard when you have so many professionals coming in and not sending that message inadvertently. They're well-intentioned, but it's not the norm, I would say. It's starting to become more talked about, but it's not the norm in our field, where parents are really encouraged to listen to the gut, what feels right, what doesn't feel right.
You're scared to death. You're, frightened of the future, and you've got this person with a PhD or a master's degree who's been doing this for 20 years. Well, they must know better than I do. And that's just not the case. And like you said, most of them have good intentions, not all of them, but most of them do, but they don't live your life and they don't have your child, 24/7. And so they can help to a certain degree, but you have to have the final say until they can have the final say, which is even better.
So that's what I love.
Until she can actually advocate for herself. It should have been making those decisions and not necessarily the experts telling you what to do.
Right. And that is right. That's the ultimate goal in life, is that your child then gets to the place where they can advocate for themselves. And
100%. And now she can tell me off, and she sasses me on words, and I love it because I waited a long time for her to sass me on the boards and talk back to me. But now she can say, hey, I want to go to college. I want to go to this movie, but her older sister wanted to take her to a thriller, and she's like, I don't like horror movies. I'm not going to go see that. And I'm also not going to go see this Disney movie. Like, she can say, I'll go do this. I don't want to do that. I want to try skiing. I don't want to try, what was it? You didn't want to try rock climbing. I mean, it's just so wonderful to finally know her preferences. Again, even with your best intentions as a mom, I would have had her try rock climbing if she couldn't communicate that she didn't want to. And it would have, now she can say, she can pick and choose what she wants to do. She took a sociology class in college this spring, and she said, I think I'd like to change my major from communications to sociology. So watching her live her life, extraordinary.
It's beautiful. Oh, I love that. All of it. It's incredible.
Oh,
gosh. And is she spelling with the letterboard and the typing now too? I know we're going to talk about
type. Yes, barely types, but she started on, freeboard stencils and worked her way up because there's a methodology that needs to be followed. And a lot of her followers on Instagram are like, where can I get that keyboard? And so she writes back to them and says, I didn't start on a keyboard. It took me years to get to a keyboard because there's a motor skill continuum that we work on very, very deliberately and very, very methodically before they get to a keyboard. But right now she is primarily on a keyboard. When we're out in public, this board can be much easier because it's a laminate and I don't have to bring the iPad and the keyboard. So a lot of times we use this when we're out and about, and there's one in every room and two in every car. So we make sure that, her voice is in every room, but she loves to type. She's working, her goal now is independent typing, which is typing without me holding the keyboard. And she's making fantastic progress on that, but it's a hard step.
Yep. Good. Amazing.
Yeah.
That's a
Girl
huge.
is ambitious. I
Oh
can
my
barely keep up with her. I can barely keep up with her.
I love it.
Like, Mom needs a break. She's like, no.
Too bad.
The way we're going to move
Yes.
forward.
I love it. Well, let's talk about spelling.
Yeah.
Let's walk through kind of a lesson. What does a spelling lesson look like?
So before I talk about the lesson, I'll just show you the boards we start on. We start on a set of 3 letter boards with the alphabet broken into 3. And the goal is to have fewer targets for the speller's eyes at first. Again, we presume they know how to spell, especially if we just read them a lesson, which we'll talk about in a second. We're just coaching their body. And so we start with the alphabet broken up. And when they get, fluent or proficient on that, then we move to 26 letters on a stencil. And then if it works for them, again, it's an individual approach. Some want to stay on the stencil, some want to go to the laminate, and some want to eventually go to the keyboard. So we're working, as we work through the lessons, we're working also up this motor hierarchy of letterboards and keyboards. So the key thing about the lesson, every session that we have as providers is based on a lesson, an academic subject, a fun topic, might be a pop culture subject, something like that. So this week, for example, we were doing Joan of Arc, because last week was from the anniversary of her execution or something. So the main thing is to make sure it's age appropriate. So I'm not going to give a lesson on Mickey Mouse to a 12-year-old. And I made this mistake in the beginning because Lora likes to listen to Dora on her phone. And I asked her provider, I said, should I do a lesson on Dora? And she's like, absolutely not.
Oh.
Dora is for 3 or 4, 5-year-olds, whatever. She said, give her a lesson on chemistry. And I said, I don't think, and I wasn't fully presuming competence yet. So, but I trusted the provider. And so I did it. I'm so glad I did. So I'll make sure that it's a high cognitive lesson that's going to feed their brain and pique their interest and challenge them. And so we go through a paragraph at a time, and I'll read a paragraph. I'll spell out any, novel words or foreign words or proper names. And then we put the lesson down and we start spelling at whatever level they are, whether they're on the 3 boards, the 26 board, or the keyboard. So we're pairing the lesson and the academic content or the fun content, whatever it is. You might be doing like, a certain, rap music lesson or something. It could be fun. But we're pairing that lesson with where they are on the boards and working with them to work through that hierarchy until we get to open communication, which can take a long time. And the first question every parent says is, how long is it going to be until they're open? And I wish I had that answer. There is no answer. It can take months. It can take years. It just depends on the motor profile of the student and the level of practice at home. It's great to see a provider. And for me, seeing a provider in the first 2 years was key, because I don't think I could have done it by myself. I certainly couldn't have done it as well by myself. But it was the practice we were putting in at home and that feedback loop with the provider that really got her where she was at the speed that she did. But there's no magic timeline, and we never rush it.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple questions I want to have you clarify too. When you do the lesson, then the lesson comes with some comprehension questions, right?
Yes. So after each paragraph, I'm glad you asked. After each paragraph, because I kind of glossed over that. After each paragraph, there's some words that we can spell. Then there's also comprehension questions. And then there's also multiple choice questions where there's more than one answer, which is a little higher cognitive. There might be questions that are prior knowledge. So if you're doing a lesson on Joan of Arc, you might ask questions about France that are related, but they weren't explicitly stated in the lesson. And then if the speller's at a point where they're open, you'll have some open questions rather, which have been, what do you think the soldiers thought of Joan when she first showed up on the battlefield? And so it's challenging. They're thinking still related, still grounded in the lesson, but challenging them to think creatively about what you've just read to them. So there's a hierarchy of questions, just like there's a hierarchy of letterboards. It's complex. It's complex. That's why there's training involved, and but it's definitely doable and definitely worth every minute.
Yes, 100%. And now I'm curious, is that how you move from let's talk about the open communication. Some people don't know what that term is. What does that mean? And is that the transition, using it in a lesson and then going to just more open in general?
Yeah. And it's different for a provider and a parent. So I'll talk about the provider and the parent perspective. So open communication is being able to express novel ideas and thoughts in your own words. Not answering, where was Joan of Arc born? France? What was the king's name? This or that? What's the capital of this? Those are how we practice building up. But open communication is when the speller starts to say, oh, Joan probably felt like she didn't belong there because she was a girl, whatever. They're giving their own thoughts. So that open communication is sort of the goal of spelling. It's what the goal is. Then we want to be able to translate that into everyday life. And that's where the parent perspective comes in. So as a provider, I'm not going to necessarily be talking to a client about their goals or how they feel about their family situation. That's for their parents to do. I'm there to help them build the skills on whatever the lesson topic is so that they can then translate that and generalize that into things like Laura telling me she wants to go to college, or telling me she, wants to go here or there, she wants to go to this house for Thanksgiving, or, making choices, telling me her dreams and goals. But having that foundation built with the provider was key for her to be able to then do the things that she's doing today with her communication, with her typing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The process, it's a bridge.
Yes. Yes. That's a good way to say it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so how do these lessons support not just communication, but confidence and growth?
The biggest thing about the lessons isn't necessarily the content itself, but the fact that for many of these people, they're being taught something at their age level for the first time in their life. And what that does for your confidence, and this is them telling me, not me just guessing, the confidence and the boost that they get from finally being taught something that they're dying to learn and finally being treated at an age appropriate level. That confidence and some easing of behaviors or dysregulation doesn't completely go away because you start spelling, but being treated at your age level and being taught can certainly mitigate a lot of that. So way before open spelling happens and they're talking about what they want to do with their life, that presumption of competence and using those lessons to feed their brains often will be a huge confidence booster. And you can talk to this too if you want, Laura, but you definitely see a difference in how they hold themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
It's so rewarding, so fun.
The gift that you keep on giving, in your work is incredible. And with your own
world.
Amazing. And what changes do you often see individuals when they begin to spell? What do you see in them?
It's just someone who's been trapped in silence, even if it's a 7 or 8 year old, but even more so when it's, a 25 or 30 year old, someone who's been waiting so long to communicate. It's like the dam bursts and there's so much to say and express. And again, with Laura, I try not to generalize because she does call me on that, but I see a lot of compassion and empathy and forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of parents, myself included, who are like, oh my gosh, she must be so mad at me that I didn't find this earlier, or she must be so traumatized that I didn't. And I'm not saying there's not trauma from being misunderstood for several years, right? But she immediately said, Mom, I forgive you. You were doing the best you could. You were doing the best you could with the information you had. Let's move on. And I see a lot of my clients telling their parents the same thing. Hey, it's okay. Let's move forward. So you've got confidence, you've got empathy and compassion, forgiveness, amazing, amazing things. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I've seen that too with my clients, and it's just they're that I've seen of the few spellers that I've worked with, and I had another one on my podcast too, is that they're just so empathetic and so loving and so generous to forgive and to move forward. And it's not that easy for people to do that in life.
It wouldn't be for me. It absolutely wouldn't be for me. And I have huge respect and just so much. Yeah. It's amazing to see.
Yeah. Incredible. And if you ever want to share anything, Laura, you let us know, and we're happy to have you share. So please know that.
Do you have anything you want to say, sweetheart? Everyone.
My life is forever changed and mom is my guide.
My life is forever changed and mom is my guide. She calls me her ride or die, but she's really my ride or die. Yeah.
I love it, Laura. That's beautiful. And what a gift that you're able to share that with your mom.
Kind of scary to think about if we hadn't found communication, but you can't, like, again, you can't dwell there, right? You got to move forward with what you've been, with what you've been given and with the gifts you have and make the most of them now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I'd love to talk about, the idea of spellers being influenced by others' opinions. Why does this happen? I know a lot of my clients are kind of worry about it, and it is a big worry for them, and it's heavy for them, and trying to figure out how to not influence, because they really want to hear and give the opportunity for their child to speak freely and,
Right.
be from their own thoughts.
Yeah, we worked this hard. The last thing I want to hear is something that you think I want to hear, or something that I'm influencing you to say. So it's a big concern because we waited so long to hear what she has to say. We want to make sure it's authentic and really hers. And when you think about it, all of us are influencing each other every day in every conversation we have. So it's unavoidable that there's going to be some level of influence. But there's easy ways as a provider to avoid it. There's relatively easy ways. So we would avoid asking leading questions, for example. So if I'm reading a lesson about something, I wouldn't say, "Oh, I bet it makes you angry to think about this, huh?" Because then it's like you're kind of putting words. So we try to keep the questions very, very vague and non-leading. So we might say, "Well, what do you think about that?" Or "What are your thoughts about this?" Or, "How would you approach this?" And so in ways that leave the page open for them, no judgment, no right answer, no wrong answer, but we really want to hear from you. And it has to come from that authentic place of being okay with whatever comes out of their letterboard, which I completely am with her and with all of my clients, because you have to have a genuine curiosity and desire to hear it, even if it's not what you would necessarily agree with or want to hear. And especially when it's your child, you've got those emotions invested in. You don't want to hear things that made them sad, or you don't want to hear things that traumatize them, but let's be real, they're there. So you want to be, available to hear that or not. You have to be in a space where you can. So again, it's very different as a provider and a parent, how you approach that. But in both cases, we don't want to influence and we don't want to lead. We want to hear what they really have to say.
Yeah. 100%. I think what's so key is that intention, that genuine, if you come with that intention, they're going to feel that, and that will translate over to, taking that pressure off to respond based on what the partner wants you to say.
Yes. And you can fake it and they know.
Yes.
And Laura says, "I can smell a phony a mile away." And she doesn't necessarily mean someone with bad intent. Yeah. Those people do exist. But she can genuinely, she tells me she can sense whether someone is 100% presuming competence or 99%, and there's still that little bit of doubt. She can sense just like that. So you have to be 100% presuming competence and 100% available to the speller to get the authentic, real thoughts. And it's, again, so worth it.
That's such a good point. That's another good point, just not having that doubt. And you just really have to.
It's human nature, that doubt, especially when you've been told for all those years that they weren't smart, that they weren't capable. So again, it's a perfectly normal thing, but you have to work through that and really hear what this person is now telling you and abandon that last 1%. But that's the hardest percent to let go, that last little.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, with my clients, I've seen, that you were in really traditional kind of in behavioral programs before they started working with me in RDI. And we talk about presuming competence, and they're so excited about it, and they see changes once they make that shift. But then they have these old habits that sometimes just pop back in.
Yes, we all do.
And that's just normal. And they have to remind themselves again. And it's just a process.
It's self-awareness. It's just catching yourself doing it. And I still do. It's been 5 years and I still catch myself doing it. But it's important to just kind of catch yourself, let your speller know or your non-speaker know, hey, look what I just did, laugh at it and, correct it and move on. So it's like, it's going to happen to all of us. It's just important to be aware of it.
Yes. Yes. And I like the laughing at it part, because you just kind of.
That's the most important part, I think. You got to have a sense of humor, which is hard because you're in the middle of doing the most important thing, in my opinion, you'll ever do for your child. So how can you be laughing and joking? But the laughing and joking is the part that helps you get through the really difficult parts. And there are difficult parts because spelling is not a linear process. And we had many months of 2 steps up and 1 step back. And oh my gosh, is this even working? Oh my gosh, is this a waste of her time? Am I frustrating her? So it's not an easy process. So for me personally, in my opinion, it's the laughing that gets you through it and the sense of humor and sharing that sense of humor with your speller, which I never did before because I didn't know she understood what humor was. I mean, just very basic things. And of course she does. She's got one of the best senses of humor I've ever encountered now that she can show it on the board. So yeah.
Yes.
We have a
Yeah.
lot of laughs together.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that's such a key thing, just to know her true personality.
Yeah.
And what a gift.
Yes. And every seller's personality is completely unique in their own, just like all the rest of us. And it's so much fun sort of peeling back those layers and discovering it. It's such a treat, such a rewarding job.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned too that it's not a linear process, because I've also had clients that have been on this journey and then almost gave up, and thankfully didn't give up, but we're kind of feeling frustrated, or not frustrated, but just not sure if it was going to work. And
frustrated is a good word. Yes. Confusing. Yeah, there were many times, especially in the early months. Once it was open and I saw what was possible, we would still have setbacks, but I could hold on to that place where I'd seen it in action. But in the early months, when they're poking around on the boards and it's like, you know what she's doing, and you're not fully presuming competence yet, but you're just full of hope, it can be, I wish it were linear. It would be really nice, but life doesn't work that way. And there will be setbacks. But the 2 steps up and the end goal are worth every frustrating minute. But yeah, it's perfectly natural to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm asking them to spell and he's throwing his body under the table and throwing the letterboards across the room. And it's like, what am I doing? And what I've had too many spellers tell me to ignore is, no matter what my body's doing, I want to communicate. And then I turn that around in my mind and say, well, what human being doesn't want to communicate? We all do. So you got to push through those moments when Lora might be screaming when I say it's time for typing or time to sit down for her college lesson or whatever. It's just her body. And it's hard to do because apraxia is such a beast. And when you ignore what someone's body is doing or saying, it feels disrespectful. But when you have that same person typing, ignore my body, push through anyway, you're caught in that sort of cycle of, do I show this? Do I push through and push this body that's telling me it doesn't want to spell? Do I push through? And most of the time you can do that. And it is what they really want. It's just apraxia is such a beast.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's huge. I mean, what a good point too, especially for those that are in that place right now where they're seeing those responses and not sure.
Yeah. We all see them, not necessarily every time, but I'll have parents come in and say, they won't spell with me at home. And I said, well, have you tried pushing through it? And they're like, well, I don't want to push it. They've been pushed enough by ABA therapists, whatever. And then the speller might spell to me, Mom, please keep trying. Please ignore my body. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really glad that we talked about that, because it is a complex process, but it's so worth it in the end. And, it's part of the journey of spellers. And so let's talk about, if there was a moment in time through this journey with Lora that, really gave you hope, that kind of showed you this is something, this is important.
Yeah, I would say every session I would take her, we would drive, 2 or 3 hours each way for her spelling sessions. Every session I would get a little more hopeful, but not like this big eureka or aha moment. It was several months in, and she was spelling with her provider, and it was a lesson on Hawaii and the Polynesians discovering Hawaii. And Donna Marie asked for a question from the lesson. I can't even remember what the question was that she asked, but it had a specific comprehension answer from the lesson. And instead of answering it, Lora spelled, she was on the 26th stencil board. She said, Mom and Dad, I love you so much. Thank you for never giving up on the Hawaii in me. And I would love to say that I broke down in tears and hugged her. And so I was in shock, Brooke. I was like, what just happened? I couldn't process it. And so it wasn't like one of those movie moments where it's like, oh, she's communicating. I just kind of froze. And the session was over and we started driving back to LA. And I actually got halfway back and pulled out off the side of the road. And I texted her provider, said, what happened? Like, I didn't even understand it. And she texted back a picture of what Lora had spelled. And that's when I had my breakdown and oh my gosh, this is real. And my child just told me she loved me for the first time in 17 years. I was waiting to hear, like, and not only that, but it was like related to the lesson in this, in this Hawaiian way of not giving up. And it was just, but it was too much for me to process at the time. So it took me a while. But that for me was like all of these months of just grinding away. We would go down to the basement every day at 4 o'clock and spell for 45 minutes, no matter what kind of mood either one of us were in. And there were, lots of crying on both sides and some tantrums and, lots of mispokes. And, was this ever going to be worth it? But that was the moment when it was like, it all paid off. And it was one of the harder things that she and I probably have ever done, but definitely the best thing.
Yeah.
So that was my moment on the side of the road on the 5 freeway saying, oh my God, what happened?
You had a moment. That's an incredible moment.
Yeah, it was.
It's beautiful. I love it. This show is brought to you by Therapeutic Approach to Growth. Therapeutic Approach to Growth helps families with relationship and behavioral needs. Their holistic programs are individualized to honor and respect each family and their autistic son or daughter's sense of self through programs such as relationship development intervention, naturalistic ABA, and animal-assisted services. If you're finding yourself frustrated or discouraged with your current behavioral programs and would like to see more long-term meaningful growth for you and your family, then contact TAG today at www.tag4growth, that's TAGFORGROWTH.com, to learn more about how to schedule a consultation or how they can offer you the help your family needs, whether in person, remotely, or in a school setting. Again, that's www.tag4growth.com. So let's talk about, the spellers that you've supported over the years. What patterns or transformations have stood out for you?
I would say a lot of the same things I saw with Lora, which is the increased confidence, the decrease in dysregulation. Again, I'm not here to say that spelling resolves all dysregulation, far from it, but a lot less frustration because finally you're being presumed competent. You're being given this avenue of communication that you can actually do and learn that doesn't require speech necessarily. Like I said, some of them do have some speech, but really it's more of a confidence of finally not being underestimated, not being infantilized, not being spoken to like 6 or 8-year-old when you're 25. And again, all of this happens long before open communication. So there's so many fundamental things you can do on day one before you ever even start spelling of presuming competence and talking to someone like they are capable of understanding you. That really makes such a difference on their demeanor and their happiness.
Yeah, it's huge. It's so huge. And I think that's something that's a big thing that we do in RDI, and it's such a game changer.
Yes.
And just honoring and respecting the person for who they are and what they're capable of.
Yeah. And I remember when she was open, she spelled, why are you dressing me in Disney t-shirts and basketball shorts? And like, oh my gosh. She wanted to wear jeans and cute tops like another 16-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. And so, the way, again, this can happen before open communication. If I had treated her like a 16-year-old, she had a sister that was a year older. If I had bought her the same clothes I was buying her sister and presumed that she wanted to dress like that,
right,
then it would have made a huge difference in her life before she could tell me. So thinking about the little things like that of what they want to wear, maybe they don't want to go see the Disney movie. Maybe they want to go see the PG-13 movie or whatever it is. And, little changes that you can make in their life that make such a huge difference just as their age.
Yes. And that list goes on and on and on through all their decisions in their life. And it's incredible, the change, because it just, again, goes back to that confidence and, feeling like you have a sense of agency over your life.
Feeling heard. Yeah. feeling heard before you can actually be heard, through open communication. Yeah. Feeling is your part of your life. Fundamental stuff, right, Brooke? I mean, it's like, basic.
It is, and it's common sense, and it should be the norm.
Hard, but
Yes, and it's going there. We're heading in that direction as a field. It's just a slow process, but it is going in that direction.
Feels like it's picking up momentum. I hope it is. Yeah, maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part, but it feels like in the last few months that it's getting,
Yeah. And you just have to keep spreading the word, keep getting the information out there. And, these little nuggets that even those examples that you just gave are, helps people to have aha moments to realize, oh, there's a lot more I can be doing, to honor and give my child those same opportunities.
Absolutely. And the best source of any of this information are the spellers themselves. And I feel like that's kind of been in waves. RPM was around for years, and then S2C. And then when the book that I read came out, there was a wave of new spellers that are, that became open within a year or two, or are just now getting open. And then the telepathy tapes came out, I think that was a year and a half, 2 years ago. And there's another wave of interest. So I think as we start to build up this army of spellers, as we call it on the spellers.com homepage, as more and more of them are able to advocate and speak for themselves, and we listen to them, it can only, fuel that momentum. That's my hope. That's my dream.
Yes, me too. I mean, speaking of the experts, they're the experts,
Exactly.
So they are the ones that should be telling us, what is going on and what do they need, and so we can help more people. So, if someone was listening that has a non-speaking child and they're feeling unsure, or overwhelmed, what would you want them to hear today?
First of all, it's completely overwhelming. And that's a totally valid feeling. So not to feel guilty about that, because I think that's what we do to ourselves. It's like, who am I to feel overwhelmed when they're the ones struggling? But if they're struggling, we're struggling, period. So that's a totally normal feeling. Again, I'll go by what Lora has told me, which is, she tells me all the time, if I don't take care of myself, I can't show up for her in the way she needs me to. So I was sort of like, oh, I can't do anything for myself because I have to be there for her, when it was really, she said just the opposite. She's like, she would lecture me. You need to get more sleep. You need to take better care of yourself. You need to go to the gym, like all of these things, like it's sort of like your inner devil on your shoulder telling you what to do. But it really is because they rely on our regulation and our nervous systems to regulate them, not just in spelling, but in life. And so if we're in that overwhelmed, sleepless, sleep deprived state of high anxiety, it's going to fuel their anxiety, and it's going to create this loop. So I'm not saying if you get, not everybody can get their 8 hours of sleep a night because their kids up all night. I've been there, done that, but within reason, as much as you can control, if you can work on yourself and your own anxiety and your own nervous system, it will be a good thing for your child. Easier said than done, but even little things can help that.
Yes, absolutely. I've had several guests on talking about that, just tools and strategies as well. And I think I could have a whole episode on of, just that concept of how important it is for parents to focus on their own regulation, their nervous system, their energy.
Yeah. Lora asked me to start meditating. So now we're doing regular meditation, and, it's helped a huge amount. But again, that came from her, which is just
amazing.
Incredible. She's so insightful and
so aware and so intuitive, to have that ability to have the awareness of what's needed and to share it it's huge. Again, everybody can do that in life. So, I think that's significant. And the meditation is so important. I think it's fantastic. You guys are doing that together. And what a gift to be able to do it together.
Right. You can choose, and we take turns choosing which session we're going to listen to on the insight timer. So it's really fun to see what she chooses. Like, what kind of theme do you want? You want, anxiety? Do you want letting something go? Do you want relaxation? Do you just want welcome to your morning? And it's really fun to see which ones she picks.
Oh, I love it. That's so great. Oh, that's huge. And, one question I did want to clarify too is, are there any age ranges that is not appropriate for spellers?
So there's no age range that's appropriate for presuming competence. That's always key. Until they're 4 or even 5, it's hard to get them to sit and poke at a letterboard. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't be treating them and talking to them and feeding their brain. And then all the way up to age 99, it's never too late. So, it's interesting that you asked, because when your child is first diagnosed at 2 or 3, they really put the fear of God on you that if you don't act yesterday, they're never going to make any progress. Early intervention, you've got to do everything tomorrow. And they overwhelm you. But really, we know now that the brain is always capable of growing and changing. We know about neuroplasticity. It's never too late to start spelling. So they can be evaluated as early as 4 or 5, but it's like any 4 or 5-year-old body is really hard to sit still. So spelling can be a challenge, but you can always do things like I was still reading her, Big Red Barn when she was 4 or 5. And I probably should have been starting with, some easier chapter books that you would read with a first grader or something. So even at a very young age, there are little things you can do, like changing the content of what you're reading or showing them beyond just Mickey Mouse and getting more towards that age appropriate material before they can start spelling.
Yes. And that's another good point. Do you recommend reading when I have a client right now that's going to be looking into spelling, and they're not ready yet just for timing wise, but do you recommend reading? Is there things you can do preemptively to get ready for spelling?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Reading. And for me, when I would read to Laura, it didn't look like she was listening. So I would probably not read to her as much as I probably would have if she'd been looking like she was engaged. Yeah. So I wish I had read to her. Now, when we read books together, she might be in the room next to me and I'm just reading away and she hears everything, but she's not sitting there, like you would expect a neurotypical person to be listening to you when you're reading. So I wish I had realized that I should have read a lot more to her and taught her a lot more, regardless of whether it looked like she was listening or learning or not. So that would be my biggest recommendation would be feed their brains, read to them, do things together, even if their body can't show that they're engaged and that they appreciate it, because they do appreciate it.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Fantastic. All right. Well, yes. Yes. And all these things, that you've learned, you're sharing with others. So, it's having an impact and it's really significant. And so, I'd love to have you kind of share one last message for you or Laura or both, what you want people to take away from this conversation, most importantly.
Yes. And let me grab my daughter.
Okay.
So Brooke was just asking if there's any last messages. If not, that's fine. But if there's anything else, you've already said a lot for her viewers and for her. I really appreciate that. All right, let's get you squished in a little bit. There you go. So you can actually see what you're typing, huh?
Never give up fighting for your non-speaker.
Never give up fighting for your non-speaker. And there will definitely, like, we've already talked about in this session, there will be times when you want to, and, it's okay to have, some doubts, but, never giving up. And
yes,
you taught me that more than anyone.
Oh, it's beautiful, Laura. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's such a powerful message and so important for people to hear that and to know that we just can't give up. We got to keep going, even on the hard days or the days where we feel discouraged. We have to keep going. And that's a message for life, too.
It is for all of us, right? And so incredibly proud of her, because with her social media account, she gets messages from people, not just all over the country, but all over the world, telling her that how much hope she's giving them. Not necessarily people who are spelling, people who are now going to look into it, people who can't find a provider and need help, that we can help. But the basic message has been, oh my gosh, thank you for giving us hope, because this, having a child with this diagnosis can put you in a very dark and hopeless place sometimes. And to have that hope to hold on to, and to be a role model for other people, it's very important.
So important. Incredible. Well, thank you both for the work you're doing. And Laura, thank you so much for sharing. Incredibly powerful and important. And I can't wait to see what's next for you and your future and what you choose to share. And I am following you and cheering you on. So
Yeah, and be sure and follow. You're going to have her Instagram in your show notes. And she also just heard yesterday she's going to be an intern this summer and for Communication for All. It's a 10-week commitment, and she's going to really hone her advocacy skills by being an intern. So it's kind of her first gig. And she also has a short story on Amazon Kindle that she wrote that just came out, 4 weeks ago. But this girl is moving and shaking.
Yes. Well, any of those resources, please send them to me and I will make sure to include them.
We absolutely will. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you for supporting and loving NonSpeakers and getting the word out with us. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. It was such an honor and just a blessing to be a part of this conversation. So thank you both.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm dancing on the edge again. The wind is calling my name. I'm dancing on the edge again. This time I'm not looking back there. You can change me, you can tell me down. I leave echoes in every place I find. I'll break the mold with rebels mind. I'm a hurricane of free rolling mind.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only. The content shared is based on the experiences, opinions, and perspectives of the hosts and their guests and should not be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. The discussions and topics covered are intended to foster understanding and awareness of autism therapies, but are not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Before making any decisions regarding therapies or treatments, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider who can provide personalized recommendations based on your unique circumstances. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and producers are not responsible for any consequences, damages, or outcomes arising from the use or application of any information during the show.